watching Channel Africa Conversations.
Without actually being perceived to be anti-America, we remain anti-imperialism, we remain anti-domination of one superpower against the other. But we also believe that relations must always be of mutual benefit and mutual interest, and that there must be respect for the sovereignty and the existence of a country, including its government, in any relationship that we have. Those relationships must not be transactional, but they must be relationships that are of mutual benefit and for the development of both countries.
Hello and welcome to Channel Africa Conversations. I'm your host, Peter Ndoro. Today we are in conversation with one of South Africa's most prominent political figures, Nomvula Paula Mokonyane, a seasoned politician and stalwart of the African National Congress, the ANC. She currently serves as the first Deputy Secretary General of the ANC and is also the convener of the party's National Executive Committee Subcommittee on International Relations. Now, as South Africa navigates complex domestic and global political terrain, from the debates over land reform and the Government of National Unity to the country's foreign policy positioning on key global conflicts, Mokonyane stands at the heart of the ANC's strategic direction, both at home and abroad. And in this conversation, we explore the ANC's role within the Government of National Unity, how the party's internationalist roots are shaping its approach to global diplomacy, and also what solidarity with the liberation movements in the region means in a shifting geopolitical landscape. First Deputy Secretary General of the African National Congress, the ANC, Nomvula Mokonyane, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks for inviting us from the ANC.
So one of your portfolios is looking after foreign policy, international relations for the ANC. Help us understand how the party's guidelines, frameworks on international relations impacts and influences government's position.
You will understand that firstly, we are the African National Congress, founded on the principles of a united, non-racial, non-sexist, and prosperous South Africa. That on our relationship and how we see ourselves in the continent, we see ourselves as being Pan-Africanist in approach, as well as believing in progressive internationalism. This then also takes us into establishing relationships that look at human rights, look at solidarity with those that are disenfranchised, look at the relationships that border on the struggle for national identity and sovereignty, as well as ensuring that there's inclusivity in all the multilateral platforms and institutions that govern the international community.
What do you say to people who suggest that sometimes ANC foreign policy actually has strained relations with some countries, and at the moment it looks like the United States might be top of that list?
Our foreign policy has been one of those progressive foreign policies, including with those countries that some may assume that we have strained relationships with. When we came into power, we did away with protectionist policies. We did away with restrictions that deprived others from participating, including us actually being too open. And hence here today we are perceived to be the ones who are targeted. The ANC believes that our policy is a policy that is much more progressive, that seeks to respect sovereignty and national interests of any country, but that pursues a cause that is for the good of South Africa, but also the good of humanity.
The approach that the South African government has taken with the US at the moment is to engage. Some are saying that you shouldn't be doing that. You should be reciprocating as other countries and other regions have done. What's your position as a party?
The ANC is known for having pursued a struggle where it believed that after every confrontation or any engagement, there must also be an opportunity where parties on opposite sides are able to sit together and engage. And even in this instance, it is our firm belief that we must still use the processes of dialogue, of diplomacy, recognition of a rule-based kind of a relationship. And only when that has failed, we will then have to look at other options that include, amongst others, looking at what would work for the good of our country without actually being perceived to be anti-America. We remain anti-imperialism. We remain anti-domination of one superpower against the other. But we also believe that relations must always be of mutual benefit and mutual interest, and that there must be respect for the sovereignty and the existence of a country, including its government, in any relationship that we have. Those relationships must not be transactional, but they must be relationships that are of mutual benefit and for the development of both countries.
The US president has brought up this issue of the land expropriation bill. For the benefit of our viewers across the continent, help us understand what the bill is about and if it's been misunderstood by the US president and Washington in general, and where it sits in terms of rectifying the wrongs of the past in South Africa.
The Expropriation Act seeks to effect redress, seeks to contribute towards transformation, seeks to contribute towards de-racialization of the development patterns and the economic development activities in our country, as well as integration of different communities. This is a tool that must help government to deal with not expropriation without compensation, but expropriation for development, and that the courts of the country must also be available to deal with areas where there's dispute. So it is a piece of legislation. It's an act that is premised on our constitution, that is premised on the respect for the rule of law, that is also seeking to deal with any form of racism, but promotion of inclusivity and prosperity for everyone in our country, contrary to what is actually being said, which is disinformation, not even misinformation, because it's not about removing whites, replacing them with black. It is about developing South Africa into a prosperous country.
There have been questions raised as well about the consistency of ANC policy in foreign matters. When we consider Palestine and Russia, some say that, hang on, Russia invaded Ukraine, Israel invaded Palestine. Why are these issues being treated differently by the government that's largely led by the ANC?
It will be unfortunate for people to say that you yourself, Peter, know that it took the ANC and our president going to both Russia and Ukraine and presented the 10-point plan on how to resolve these issues, to an extent where it also took South African women to participate as part of civil society in the programs that sought to bring back the children from Ukraine that were in Russia. The African National Congress has also been a facilitator in that regard. We do have issues around NATO, as well as how we see the issues about NATO and its role. But on the two countries, our view is that there must be a continued coexistence of Ukraine and Russia without NATO taking advantage and undermining what has been the historical agreements in that regard. The Palestinian situation is totally different from that of Russia and Ukraine. Here it is about genocide, it is about imposition into a nation as well as undermining sovereignty of a nation, and where people have actually been killed, women and children, infrastructure destroyed, access to humanitarian aid being deprived, an experience that we have lived under as South Africa, that the ANC championed and supported by the Palestinians, a cause that we believe it is a just cause that we have taken to the International Court of Justice, and we're now looking up to the court's proceedings so then they can make an adequate determination. And that is how we see this. We also are now working together with the Palestinians in encouraging them to be united and them having a program about determining the way forward. And we do believe that there's still room for finding one another if only the United Nations can be able to assert its authority as well as the International Court of Outcomes being implemented.
Talking about finding one another, the Government of National Unity has come into public debate quite a bit now. And there have been moments where it has been tested. Education was one area, and more recently now, VAT. But I know for sure that there have been differences on the foreign policy front, particularly with countries like Israel. How is the GNU managing to deal with these differences, and can it hold, do you think?
The GNU can hold because it's a GNU of 10 political parties committed to a statement of intent, as well as the 6 priorities that were adopted by the National Parliament. What is at stake now is, again, the inconsistencies of some of the parties within the GNU that seek to undermine the Constitution, the separation of powers, the code of ethics of ministers, members of the executive, as well as being unable to use the platforms that have been created under the GNU to engage. That is where we find ourselves in, where some want to become the opposition whilst they are part of the executive. And of course, we know that they themselves want to open up issues that are not necessarily related to the budget. If there's a need to discuss issues of foreign policy, parliamentary processes are there. If there are issues about reviewing any piece of legislation in our country, they understand. They've been part of parliamentary processes and public participation. And we do believe as the ANC will painstakingly go ahead, engaging with everybody, talking to everyone, and making people appreciate that the stability of our country is important, repackaging and repurposing our own interventions and our means of growing the economy of our country is now of paramount importance as compared to being involved in disinformation and sabotaging the cause for a better and a prosperous South Africa.
So what is the official position of the party? Because some of your party members have been saying that, you know, the Democratic Alliance, after voting against the VAT increase, shouldn't be part of the GNU.
The ANC has had a reflection on this matter, and the African National Congress has had its National Working Committee. Today, the Secretary General of the ANC will actually announce the outcomes of the Working Committee and the way forward. We remain committed to work with everybody, but we also frown upon those who seek to undermine the stability that the GNU has brought, and we also refuse to have a situation where there can be conditions that are put outside of the VAT, where now people want to put issues of policy, issues of tampering with the Constitution at the expense of moving forward with the passing of the budget and being able to implement what is of importance as contained in that particular budget. That is the position of the African National Congress. And once the Secretary General has actually announced, we will then all of us go back to work and engage. But we are not trapped into a relationship with one. We've got a relationship with all parties in parliament, including those that are not part of the government of national unity. And that is what we must respect, and that we must be able to honor the agreements and the conditions that came out of the parliamentary processes that made the fiscal policy framework to be adopted by the National Assembly.
Let's talk a little bit more about the region, Africa. Sadly, our foreign policy, South Africa's foreign policy across the continent isn't talked about as much as it should. I just wonder what your outlook is generally regarding foreign policy across the continent.
Peter, we are happy that we are part of the SADC, and also we work very well with the organs as well as in the programs of the region through SADC. We do not see ourselves as a party in isolation. We believe that it is better that we all coordinate and also strengthen the work of the African Union so that no country or no organization assumes dominance over the others. We now have also supported what has come out of the AU and Eastern Community Development countries, where there's been a resolution around the South African National Defence Force, and other military formations moving out of the DRC. And we are also delighted that one of our own comrades, Kgalema Motlanthe, is one of the facilitators that has been identified. This is what is important. There must be dialogue, there must be discussion, and we can't always be starting afresh. We must go and reflect as to what has happened to the previous agreements we entered upon. How do we strengthen institutions of governance, and how do we also deal with the issues around influence from external forces, so that then the DRC can be able to govern itself, and they must set up their own systems. And working together through SADC and the African Union, we help in the reconstruction of the DRC and the peace, everlasting peace. The same with what is happening in Sudan and South Sudan. We remain very committed in giving the necessary support and being part of the solutions, as we have done also now recently in Mozambique.
Does an ANC government have the courage to bring to book those countries and those leaders across the continent that are letting down their people, that are accused of human rights abuses and even stealing elections? How do you deal with these? Because again, from the outside looking in, it almost sounds as if there's too much diplomacy and not enough action.
What we must not do is what you want us to be, Peter. We are not a super government of Africa. There's SADC, there's the AU, there are organs that exist. Those are the committees and bodies that we must all support in an endeavor of silencing the gun, in an endeavor of promoting intra-trade, in an endeavor of dealing with the remnants of colonization in our continent, and finally making sure that we all exist on the basis of what we seek to realize, which is self-determination and sovereignty of each African continent. So I think you expect a lot from the NC, and you expect a lot from the South African government. We are part of SADC, we are part of the AU. We will all work in line with what we have all endorsed, which is Africa 2063, that also deals with issues of peace and security, that deals with issues of economic development, how we strengthen the AFCTA, and how we also make sure that the AU has capacity for peacekeeping as well as for monitoring, so that then there can be peace in our continent.
Let's talk about the dynamics in terms of the solidarity with liberation movements, certainly in the region, other parts of the world as well. And during the struggle, I think it made perfect sense because common purpose, common cause, and also support. Post democracy, the democratic era coming into being, what role do these solidarities continue to play in a democratic dispensation?
Our struggles are not over. And I think that's what all of us must appreciate. Assuming political power is not the end of the struggle. Economic emancipation and building new institutions for democracy, for economic growth, and for inter-trade within Africa continues to be very important. And hence, we as the ANC, working together with our sister liberation movement, will be hosting a summit of liberation movements from the 2nd to the 5th of May, amongst others, to reflect on what is happening in the region, what is happening in the continent, but most importantly, what is happening globally, and whether our struggles have yielded what we have committed ourselves to. And how do we then deal with new forms of imperialism and imposed colonization of our own continent through exploitation of our mineral resources and abuse of the dominance to the extent where you have unending conflicts and unending internal national conflicts, as well as poverty and hunger. And yet we've got minerals and capacity that can feed and sustain the African continent. We are of the view that we must work together against regime change. We must work together to have a common voice in all these other multilateral platforms, so that then we pursue this yet to be complete struggle for a democratic society, not only in South Africa, but also globally. As you know already now, many of our own countries, former liberation parties, have gone through various challenges of regime change, of divisions, of disunity. All these, we need to look at them and say, how do we work together to undermine the agenda that seeks to undermine the hard-won gains of our independence?
So these long-standing relationships make sense, supporting each other. There is a challenge, though, and I guess maybe you can address this. When it comes to elections, we see the ANC sometimes going to support certain parties at their rallies. Are you picking a side in an election outcome, or how do you explain entering into politics of certain countries and supporting your friends as a liberation movement sister or brother?
When we went into these last elections, as it has happened from 1994, we had our sister parties from Africa and internationally being part of us. So it is not the ANC only that goes to these rallies. In the last elections, we had 21 political parties being part of the ANC elections campaign. And we do that also to our sister parties because we understand that the mission to a democratic society in Namibia, a prosperous nation in Mozambique, a prosperous and united Angola, is a struggle that is still ongoing. So we do not shy away from identifying with this cause because it is a shared cause. We shared the trenches for political liberation. We must forever also share trenches against regime change. So we're not picking sides. We remain consistent and principled.
All right. So there seems to be rumblings from the United States that individual people in South Africa, ANC in particular, are going to be targeted What's the party's reaction to these threats by the US?
Americans have voted for the Trump administration. It is the Americans who are deciding on this. The world is bigger than the United States of America's administration. We remain anti-imperialism. We're not anti-America. If America decides whatever that it decides against the leaders of the ANC will respond at that appropriate time. We remain unshaken in what we stand for, and we remain resolute to even engage Americans themselves. I'm sure you have also seen just yesterday and the last 2 days what is happening in America. That's not what we want to see. Would prefer that American government must focus on leading the people of America and serving the interests of the people of America. Of course, they play a very important role in the geopolitics, but that does not mean they have to determine policies of other parties in the world.
This is a very important year for South Africa and the continent at large in terms of the G20 presidency. What's your message to government about the G20 year and the summit that's on the horizon?
We're quite humbled by the fact that the hosting of the G20 in South Africa has also been put as Africa hosting, in the same vein as we did with BRICS, where South African government involved other parties and other governments coming from Africa, because we believe that it's a very historic occasion. That also goes with what is the theme about solidarity in all the years of G20. It is the first time that it also looks at issues of solidarity, issues of democracy, and unity. This also then augurs well with us as the continent, and we're looking forward not only to the summit, but to the outcomes of the summit, as well as to a shared perspective of how we use G20 to strengthen the Africa Trade Agreement, as well as pursue the Agenda 2063, which is the agenda of the AU for the good of the African continent.
So our focus really has been on ANC foreign policy. Just as we start to wrap up, I think I do have to ask you, you've had time now to reflect quite a bit on the last general elections, the national and provincial elections. As you reflect on the fortunes and losing of some faith by your party faithful, what would you say is the state of the party now, and the direction that you need to take?
We have humbly appreciated the votes that we got from the 11 million South African voters. We remain committed to reaching out to the 22 million that didn't vote. And hence we would not tire to ensure that there's stability also in the ANC. And hence our program of organizational renewal involves, amongst others, reconnection with the people of South Africa, holding our public representatives accountable in terms of our councillors, our members of the legislature, and members of parliament. We have also gone out to interact with civil society so that then we can be in a position to explain ourselves, but also to hear them out. As we prepare for the coming local government elections, our approach is that issues of service delivery are very important. Accountability of public representatives is key, and of importance is the functioning structures of the ANC in the communities where people live, and be able to be the ones who resolve problems as and when they arise. who have been led by the president, who has gone back to his branch, back to his constituency over this past weekend, interacting with the membership and the community. And we believe it is that social distance that we need to sort out, as well as responding to people's needs with regard to poverty, unemployment, and inequality. The ANC will never actually shy away from accepting that we have had our challenges, and hence we are on a path towards renewal.
First Deputy Secretary General of the African National Congress, the ANC in South Africa, Nomvula Mokanyane, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa Conversation.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thanks for inviting us.
And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of Channel Africa Conversations. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. And just before I go, please, we'd love to hear from you. So take a look on the screen now. You'll find the social media pages that we are on, and we'd love you to comment there. Tell us what you think about the program, the conversations that we're having, and also maybe the kinds of conversations you want to see more of and the people that you would like us to get hold of. We look forward to hearing from you. Until the next time, take care.